Hello there. Hello, everyone. I'm Gildart, and this is Fireside Reading. Welcome to Sean, Mary, and Don't Have a Tiff, I think it said. I think you might be new. I don't know. Maybe you've been here before. Dawn, I saw several other names. Evelyn, I think. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. I love that you joined me. It's Saturday today. I won't be reading tomorrow and Monday because Melora, my wife, is dancing this Monday on Dancing with the Stars, the semi-finals. If you would be able to vote, that would be wonderful for her. You have to do so Eastern time at 8 o'clock. So West Coast time between 5 and 7. East Coast time between 8 and 10. So, but you have to do it in that window. You can't do it when you see it if you live on the West or any other time apart from the East Coast. And you're allowed to vote 10 times if you text to 21523. And it's very exciting. She's doing 2 dances. She's doing a contemporary dance, and she's doing a rumba, which is very difficult, apparently. So we shall see what we shall see. But it's lovely that so many of you send little messages and support her. So thank you. Fireside Reading started over a year ago now, a year and a half ago now, when we had a lockdown, and we have been putting it up on YouTube. All the books we've read are on YouTube, and we are currently in the middle of A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. And in the chapter we're reading is chapter 8. Miss Quested, Adela, and Ronnie Hislop are Miss Quested just decided that they are not going to get married. And then they went for a drive with the Nawab Bahadur in his car, driven by his chauffeur. And they had a little accident, and they just were about to be rescued by Miss Derrick, who we've already met. She's the secretary of a Maharini, which I think is the wife of a Maharaja, and is very British. Welcome to a fireside reading of A Passage to India, Chapter 8, Part 2. Mr. Heslop, Miss Quested, what are you holding up an innocent female for? We've had a breakdown. But how putrid! We ran into a hyena. How absolutely rotten! Can you give us a lift? Yes, indeed. Take me too, said the Nawab Bahadur. Hey, what about me? Cried Mr. Harris. Now, what's all this? I'm not an omnibus, said Miss Derrick with decision. I've a harmonium and 2 dogs in here with me as it is. I'll take 3 of you if one will sit in front and nurse a pug. No more. I will sit in front, said the Nawab Bahadur. Then hop in. I've no notion who you are. Hey, no. What about my dinner? I can't be left alone all the night. Trying to look and feel like a European, the chauffeur interposed aggressively. He still wore a topi, despite the darkness, and his face, to which the ruling race had contributed little beyond bad teeth, peered out of it pathetically and seemed to say, What's it all about? Don't worry me so, you blacks and whites. Here I am, stuck in damn India same as you, and you got to fit me in better than this. Nusu will bring you out some suitable dinner upon a bicycle, said the Nawab Bahadur, who had regained his usual dignity. I shall dispatch him with all possible speed. Meanwhile, repair my car. They sped off. and Mr. Harris, after a reproachful glance, squatted down upon his hams. When English and Indians were both present, he grew self-conscious, because he did not know to whom he belonged. For a little, he was vexed by opposite currents in his blood. Then they blended, and he belonged to no one but himself. But Miss Derrick was in tearing spirits. She had succeeded in stealing the Mudkul car. Her Maharaja would be awfully sick, but she didn't mind. He could sack her if he liked. "I don't believe in these people letting you down," she said. "If I didn't snatch like the devil, I should be nowhere. He doesn't want the car, silly fool. Surely it's to the credit of his state I should be seen about in it at Chandrapur during my leave. He ought to look at it that way. Anyway, he's got to look at it that way. My Maharani's different. My Maharani's a dear. That's her fox terrier, poor little devil. I fished them out both with the driver. Imagine taking dogs to a chief's conference. As sensible as taking chiefs, perhaps." She shrieked with laughter. The harmonium's my little mistake, I own. They rather had me over the harmonium. I meant it to stop on the train. Oh, law! Ronnie laughed with restraint. He did not approve of English people taking service under the native states, where they obtain a certain amount of influence, but at the expense of the general prestige. The humorous triumphs of a freelance are of no assistance to an administrator, and he told the young lady that she would outdo Indians at their own game if she went on much longer. "They always sack me before that happens, and then I get another job. The whole of India seethes with Maharanis and Ranis and Begums who clamour for such as me." "Really, I had no idea." "How could you have an idea, Mr. Hislop? What should he know about Maharanis, Miss Quested? Nothing. At least, I should hope not." "I understand those big people are not particularly interesting," said Adela, quietly disliking the young woman's tone. Her hand touched Ronnie's again in the darkness, and to the animal thrill there was now added a coincidence of opinion. "Ah, there you're wrong. They're priceless." "I would scarcely call her wrong," broke out the Nawab Bahadur from his isolation on the front seat, whither they had relegated him. "A native state, a Hindu state, the wife of a ruler of a Hindu state, may beyond doubt be a most excellent lady, and let it not be for a moment supposed that I suggest anything against the character of Her Highness the Maharani of Mutkul, but I fear she will be uneducated. I fear she will be superstitious. Indeed, how could she be otherwise? What opportunity of education has such a lady had? Oh, superstition is terrible, terrible. Oh, it is the great defect in our Indian character." And as if to point his criticism, the lights of the civil station appeared on a rise to the right. He grew more and more voluble. "Oh, it is the duty of each and every citizen to shake superstition off. And though I have little experience of Hindu states, and none of this particular one, namely Mudkul, the ruler, I fancy, has a salute of but 11 guns, yet I cannot imagine that they have been as successful as British India, where we see reason and orderliness spreading in every direction like a most health-giving flood." Miss Derrick said, "Golly!" Undeterred by the expletive, the old man swept on. His tongue had been loosed, and his mind had several points to make. He wanted to endorse Miss Quest's remark that big people are not interesting, because he was bigger himself than many an independent chief. At the same time, he must neither remind nor inform her that he was big, lest she felt she had committed a discourtesy. This was the groundwork of his oration. Worked in with it was his own gratitude to Miss Derrick for the lift, his willingness to hold a repulsive dog in his arms, and his general regret for the trouble he had caused the human race during the evening. Also, he wanted to be dropped near the city to get hold of his cleaner and to see what mischief his grandson was up to. As he wove all these anxieties into a single rope, he suspected that his audience felt no interest, and that the city magistrate fondled either maiden behind the cover of the harmonium, but good breeding compelled him to continue. It was nothing to him if they were bored, because he did not know what boredom is, and it was nothing to him if they were licentious, because God has created all races to be different. The accident was over, and his life, equably useful, distinguished, happy, ran on as before and expressed itself in streams of well-chosen words. When this old geezer left them, Ronnie made no comment, but talked lightly about polo. Turton had taught him that it is sounder not to discuss a man at once, and he reserved what he had to say on the Nawab's character until later in the evening. His hand, which he had removed to say goodbye, touched Adela's again. She caressed it definitely, he responded, and their firm and mutual pressure surely meant something. They looked at each other when they reached the bungalow, for Mrs. Moore was inside it. It was for Miss Quested to speak, and she said nervously, "Ronnie, I should like to take back what I said on the Maidan." He assented, and they became engaged to be married in consequence. Neither had foreseen such a consequence. She had meant to revert to her former condition of important and cultivated uncertainty, but it had passed out of her reach at its appropriate hour. Unlike the green bird or the hairy animal, she was labelled now. She felt humiliated again, for she deprecated labels, and she felt, too, that there should have been another scene between her lover and herself at this point, something dramatic and lengthy. He was pleased instead of distressed. He was surprised, but he had really nothing to say. What indeed is there to say? To be or not to be married? That was the question, and they had decided it in the affirmative. "Come along and let's tell the mater all this." Opening the perforated zinc door that protected the bungalow from the swarms of winged creatures, the noise woke the mater up. She had been dreaming of the absent children who were so seldom mentioned, Ralph and Stella, and did not at first grasp what was required of her. She too had become used to thoughtful procrastination, and felt alarmed when it came to an end. When the announcement was over, he made a gracious and honest remark. "Look here, both of you. See India if you like, and as you like. I know I made myself rather ridiculous at Fielding's, but it's different now. I wasn't quite sure of myself. My duties here are evidently finished. I don't want to see India now. Now for my passage back," was Mrs. Moore's thought. She reminded herself of all that a happy marriage means, and of her own happy marriages, one of which had produced Ronnie. Adela's parents had also been happily married, and excellent it was to see the incident repeated by the younger generation. On and on. The number of such unions would certainly increase as education spread and ideals grew loftier and characters firmer. But she was tired by her visit to Government College. Her feet ached. Mr. Fielding had walked too fast and too far. The young people had annoyed her in the tum-tum and given her to suppose they were breaking with each other. And though it was all right now, she could not speak as enthusiastically of wedlock or of anything as she should have done. Ronnie was suited. Now she must go home, and help the others, if they wished. She was past marrying herself, even unhappily. Her function was to help others, her reward to be informed that she was sympathetic. Elderly ladies must not expect more than this. They dined alone. There was much pleasant and affectionate talk about the future. Later on, they spoke of passing events, and Ronnie reviewed and recounted the day from his own point of view. It was a different day from the women's, because while they had enjoyed themselves, or thought, he had worked. Muharram was approaching, and as usual, the Chandrapur Mohammedans were building paper towers of a size too large to pass under the branches of a certain pupal tree. One knew what happened next. The tower struck. A Mohammedan climbed up the pebble and cut the branch off. The Hindus protested. There was a religious riot, and heaven knew what, with perhaps the troops sent in. There had been deputations and conciliation committees under the auspices of Turton, and all the normal work of Chandrapur had been hung up. Should the procession take another route, or should the tower be shorter? The Mohammedans offered the former, the Hindus insisted on the latter. The collector had favoured the Hindus until he suspected that they had artificially bent the tree nearer the ground. They said it sagged naturally. Measurements, plans, an official visit to the spot. But Ronnie had not disliked his day, for it proved that the British were necessary to India. There would certainly have been bloodshed without them. His voice grew complacent again. He was here not to be pleasant, but to keep the peace. And now that Adela had promised to be his wife, she was sure to understand. "What does our old gentleman of the car think?" she asked, and her negligent tone was exactly what he desired. "Our old gentleman is helpful and sound, as he always is over public affairs. You've seen in him our show Indian." "Have I really?" "I'm afraid so. Incredible, aren't they? Even the best of them. They all forget their back collar studs sooner or later. You've had to do with 3 sets of Indians today, the Bhattacharya's, Aziz, and this chap. And it really isn't a coincidence that they've all let you down." "I like Aziz. Aziz is my real friend," Mrs. Moore interposed. "When the animal runs into us, the Nawab loses his head, deserts his unfortunate chauffeur, intrudes upon Miss Derrick. No great crimes, but no white man would have done it." "What animal?" "Oh, we had a small accident on the Marabar Road. Adela thinks it was a hyena." "An accident?" she cried. "Nothing, no one hurt. Our excellent host awoke much rattled from his dreams, appeared to think it was our fault, and chanted, 'Exactly, exactly.'" Mrs. Moore shivered. "A ghost?" But the idea of a ghost scarcely passed her lips. The young people did not take it up, being occupied with their own outlooks and deprived of support. It perished, or was reabsorbed into the part of the mind that seldom speaks. "Yes, nothing criminal," Ronnie summed up, "but there's the native, and there's one of the reasons why we don't admit him to our clubs, and how a decent girl like Miss Derrick can take service under natives puzzles me. But I must get on with my work. Krishna!" Krishna was the peon who should have brought the files from his office. He had not turned up, and a terrific row ensued. Ronnie stormed, shouted, howled, and only the experienced observer could tell that he was not angry, did not much want the files, and only made a row because it was the custom. Servants, quite understanding, ran slowly in circles, carrying hurricane lamps. "Krishna the earth, Krishna the stars," replied, until the Englishman was appeased by their echoes, fined the absent peon 8 annas, and sat down to his arrears in the next room.
"Will you pay patience with your future mother-in-law, dear Adela, or does it seem too tame?" "I should like to. I don't feel a bit excited. I'm just glad it's settled." Excuse me. "I'm just glad it's settled up at last. But I'm not conscious of vast changes. We are all three the same people still." "That's much the best feeling to have."
She dealt out the first row of demon.
"I suppose so,"
said the girl thoughtfully.
"I feared at Miss Fielding's that it might be settled the other way. Black knave on a red queen."
They chatted gently about the game. Presently Adela said,
"You heard me tell Aziz and Godbole I wasn't stopping in their country. I didn't mean it, so why did I say it? I feel I haven't been frank enough, attentive enough or something. It's as if I got everything out of proportion. You have been so very good to me, and I meant to be good when I sailed, but somehow I haven't been. Mrs. Moore, if one isn't absolutely honest, what is the use of existing?"
She continued to lay out her cards. The words were obscure, but she understood the uneasiness that produced them. She had experienced it twice herself during her own engagements, this vague contrition and doubt. All had come right enough afterwards, and doubtless would this time. Marriage makes most things right enough.
"I wouldn't worry," she said. "It's partly the odd surroundings. You and I keep on attending to trifles instead of what's important. We are what the people here call new." "You mean that my bothers are mixed up with India?" "India's—"
She stopped.
"What made you call it a ghost?" "Call what a ghost?" "The animal thing that hit us. Didn't you say, 'Oh, a ghost,' in passing?" "I couldn't have been thinking of what I was saying." "It was probably a hyena, as a matter of fact." "Ah, very likely."
And they went on with their patience. Down in Chandrapur, the Nawab Bahadur waited for his car. He sat behind his townhouse, a small unfurnished building which he rarely entered, in the midst of the little court that always improvises itself round Indians of position. As if turbans were the natural product of darkness, a fresh one would occasionally froth to the front, incline itself towards him, and retire. He was preoccupied. His diction was appropriate to a religious subject. 9 years previously, when first he had had a car, he had driven it over a drunken man and killed him, and the man had been waiting for him ever since. The Nawab Bahadur was innocent before God and the law. He had paid double the compensation necessary, but it was no use. The man continued to wait in an unspeakable form close to the scene of his death. None of the English people knew of this, nor did the chauffeur. It was a racial secret, communicable more by blood than speech. He spoke now in horror of the particular circumstances. He had led others into danger. He had risked the lives of 2 innocent and honored guests. He repeated, "If I had been killed, what matter? It must happen sometime. But they who trusted me." The company shuddered and invoked the mercy of God. Only Aziz held aloof, because a personal experience restrained him. Was it not by despising ghosts that he had come to know Mrs. Moore? "You know Nureddin," he whispered to the grandson, an effeminate youth whom he seldom met, always liked, and invariably forgot. "You know, my dear fellow, we Muslims simply must get rid of these superstitions, or India will never advance. How long must I hear of the savage pig upon the Malabar road? Nureddin looked down. Aziz continued. Your grandfather belongs to another generation, and I respect and love the old gentleman, as you know. I say nothing against him, only that it is wrong for us, because we are young. I want you to promise me, Nureddin, are you listening? Not to believe in evil spirits, and if I die, for my health grows very weak, to bring up my 3 children to disbelieve in them too. Nureddin smiled, and a suitable answer rose to his pretty lips. But before he could make it, the car arrived, and his grandfather took him away. The game of patience up in the civil lines went on longer than this. Mrs. Moore continued to murmur, "Red 10 on a black knave." Miss Quested to assist her and to intersperse among the intricacies of the play details about the hyena, the engagement, the Maharani of Mutkul, the Bhattacharyas, and the day generally, whose rough, desiccated surface acquired, as it receded, a definite outline, as India itself might, could it be viewed from the moon. Presently the players went to bed, but not before other people had woken up elsewhere, people whose emotions they could not share, and whose existence they ignored. Never tranquil, never perfectly dark, the night wore itself away, distinguished from other nights by 2 or 3 blasts of wind, which seemed to fall perpendicularly out of the sky and to bounce back into it, hard and compact, leaving no freshness behind them. The hot weather was approaching. Thank you all for joining me. Not going to be reading tomorrow, nor Monday, but back again with Chapter 9 on Tuesday. I do hope you can all join me then. And I hope that if you can, you watch Dancing with the Stars. Until I see you all again on Tuesday, everyone, please stay very, very well. Good night.